Hello, friends. Welcome back to Becoming Unbound, the podcast where we dive deep into the journeys of those who have broken free from the traditional path and created a life on their own terms. I'm your host, Carly Butler, and this show is all about the pursuit of freedom. Whether it means leaving a 9-to-5, redefining success, or just stepping into a more authentic version of yourself, each episode we have real, unfiltered conversations with incredible people who have embraced the challenge of building a life that aligns with their passions, values, and purpose. Today, I am so excited to sit down with Kristen Bustamante, the founder of New Leaf Energetics. Kristen is a powerhouse when it comes to helping others step into their divine life purpose. She's not only a gifted channeler, able to tap into higher levels of divine consciousness and receive guidance on behalf of others, but she is also deeply passionate about teaching meditation and leading transformative experiences. Through her private sessions, meditation classes, and her upcoming women's retreat, Kristen is creating a space for people to connect with their highest selves and embrace their path for clarity and confidence. I cannot wait to dive into this conversation and hear all about her journey, her work, and the incredible insights she has to share. All right, friends, let's dive in. All right, welcome, Kristen.
Thank you, Carly.
So glad to have you on the podcast today. This is amazing.
I am also so excited for our conversation.
Yeah, so let's start off today with, we can kind of talk about how we got to know each other. You can tell us and the listeners a little bit about yourself. So let's start off. I know my version of how we met. Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit how we came to connect and how this conversation is even happening?
Yeah, absolutely. A while back, I developed this ability almost overnight through teaching myself how to meditate. I found that I was able to tap into a different level of consciousness and receive a lot of information about basically any question that I asked. It was mind-blowing. It was overwhelming. It was very life transforming. And when that happened, I knew that I could ask questions that I had, but I was actually really curious to understand if I could ask questions for other people. So through, at the time, a few close friends, I mentioned that this is happening and asked them if they had anyone that I've never met, that I wouldn't know anything about, that I could speak to and see if I could ask any questions on their behalf. And when I go into these meditation states and this channeling state, the thing that, let's call it my higher self, really wants to talk about most is, what are people's divine life purpose? What is my divine life purpose? And what is the divine life purpose of others? So I really wanted to understand if I could do that on behalf of others. So that's where you came in. You were a friend of a friend that I hadn't met and was referred as someone who might be really open to this, who was going through a life transition of their own, and who might benefit from having some questions answered. So you and I had a brief connection. You told me about the questions that you had, and then I went into and did a channeling for you. And then the rest is history. And I'd love to hear your version of events after that.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding me of that. It was the key that we didn't know who we were. I was kind of like a test for you. So that's amazing. Right. And I remember our mutual friend who had sort of said, like, I have this friend who's experiencing this gift. And I had already known kind of about channelers and that idea of like listening in and having questions answered. And, you know, I'd sometimes heard of like, and even for myself, sometimes I'm like, oh, this information that I just felt down into my body is not necessarily mine. Like it is mine now because I've heard it. But how interesting that like all of a sudden there was just this moment where you're like, wow, there's another source of information other than just our mind that we think about all day. And that was incredible to me. And I remember hearing that story and I was like, wow, that's so amazing. And I just feel like there's so many more people experiencing this. So what an incredible gift that you have. And I can definitely say that it was it was super transformative for me. And I remember the exact moment where I was like, okay, like I've had, like a psychic reading. I've had cards pulled for myself during energy readings. I feel like I've gone down all of those roads. And the most profound part of all of those things is always that, like, when you hear the information, a lot of times it is just some of those things where you're like, oh, actually, I kind of knew that already. Like, and that was the biggest feeling that I walked away from after hearing sort of what you were able to tell me about that divine life purpose. And it's funny, it actually happened when I got to listen. I was on a break at work at a job that I was trying to understand why I felt compelled to leave. And it was my whole career. And then I'm sitting there being like, oh my gosh, in this beautiful place of earth, the sun was coming in, and it was just this like God moment, I would say, like a moment where I was visited by God, listening to your voice, hearing that divine life purpose, and feeling all of a sudden like all of the things that I was thinking in my mind that I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, but oh my gosh, wouldn't it be amazing if someone could like tap into that and help me know that and sort of reassure me of that. And that's exactly what your channeling message to me was. It's pretty remarkable to me that like so many of these experiences can happen in our lives, and you've done it probably for other people. And is there any themes that kind of come out of that? Is that kind of do you get similar answers like, oh, I kind of knew that, but it was just so nice to hear it from someone else? Or is the information always completely new to people?
Both actually. Sometimes people they have a feeling. And I would say most people deep down actually do know what their divine life purpose is. They may not be able to articulate it. It might be a feeling, but from what I've learned, everyone is always going towards their divine life purpose, consciously or unconsciously, in the big and small actions that we take, especially around career, choices that we make or don't make. But this force is always kind of nudging us towards our divine life purpose. So some people actually already have a very clear idea of what that is. They're usually very, you might recognize them as being very happy, contented, joyful, feeling like they have purpose and not really questioning what they're doing. They just feel very settled. These people generally, maybe they can't articulate the exact words, but they know deep within them what their life purpose is. And then I do a lot of readings for people that feel very unsettled. They feel that they're on the wrong path. They can't articulate why. They might have a successful career, or other things might be going very well for them by societal standards, but they know within them that they're not happy. Something feels wrong to them. They feel like they're on the wrong path. So I do readings like that as well. And generally speaking, when I let them know their divine life purpose, it's usually like yes, thank you. I did know that. And just to have that affirmation that there is some sense of, truth to what they've been feeling all along, that they are not crazy, that, their intuition is correct. So now what divine life purpose is, it's not exactly a job. So it's not specifically saying, oh, you should be a doctor. So that's why it's harder to articulate for people sometimes, to really have them say, oh, I feel like I should be doing this. A divine life purpose, and what I hear as a broader theme, these are divine principles that exist in our universe. And every one of us has within us a principle that is most dominant, or a vibration that is most similar to another vibration that it just exists naturally in our universe. And so these could be universal truths. There's a lot of times I see a lot of these divine life principles appear in, religious texts, ancient religions from around the world, sort of these concepts and principles that just seem very universal. So it's really, when I do the reading, it's about explaining what the principle itself is and how the vibration of that person is most closely connected. And then the follow-up question that I usually get is, well, what job can I do that's, I would feel fulfilled in, or that's most closely related to my divine life principle? And from there, I'm usually able to give about 3 or 4 suggestions and ideas. That's just to get the wheels going for that person. Everyone has free will and, can really carve their own path, but just to give them that starting point for idea generation. And in many cases, the ideas that I'm suggesting are ideas that that person has considered, but in some cases is just too scared to pursue. Yeah. So,
wow,
yeah. So
that's incredible.
I know it's amazing. I mean, the amount of wisdom and information that I've learned, I feel is a gift to myself. It is like you described, almost godlike. It is something that I can't fully describe or explain even, but just feel so grateful to be privileged to hear and understand this incredibly deep and profound information and understanding almost the way the universe works and why we're here, and that everyone is here for a special reason. And that reason always, like when we talk about big themes that I've heard, everyone is here to, in some way, rebalance or reharmonize our world. And that's what the universe is always moving towards, is harmony and balance. And so our universe is really, and our world and the energies that surround us are miraculous things, and are sort of know what mix of energies will create that balance and harmony that we're all seeking. So people are actually put here with a frequency or vibration that is meant to provide that equilibrium, that rebalancing that we're all searching for. And that, sometimes we refer to that as someone's personality. How does that person have this personality and that other person, maybe even from the same sibling group, is so incredibly different? And it's because their spirit actually has a purpose that's quite distinct. So it's wonderful to learn about that, and to learn about that why and how we're all here towards a bigger purpose. And for some people, that's actually very comforting to know. And in many cases, I've always felt that. I've always felt that I was here for a reason. I have this special purpose. That feeling is very common because it's true.
Wow, that's amazing. And to those listening, I have to accredit almost, not all, there's lots of factors came into this podcast being birthed and my shifting of careers, but almost I can remember the moment when I finally was like, yes, and that truth came through for me. And I think I was just talking about this, I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent, last night at a networking event, and we were saying that like this idea that like this feeling of, oh, I really don't want to go to work today, that there's almost a physical resistance. And for the longest time, I was like, well, people just say like, oh, well, nobody wants to go to work, or like, yeah, you just have to do it because you need a paycheck. And although that's valid, people rely on you at a job. If you like slack off on your responsibilities and just don't show up, like there is consequences to that. And the unending feeling of dread when going to a job, and the feeling that produces in your gut or your head or whatever it is, like that is real. And there is truth to that. And it kind of just demonstrates that in that dread, in that feeling of not wanting to go to work, is that feeling, is your body trying to let you know that like, yeah, that's that feeling of like something's off, something's just not right. And maybe if instead of just, slumping that feeling off, just saying like, yeah, no, everyone just hates going to work. You just kind of do it. You just grind through. It's like, or what if we listened to that feeling and we honored that, and then all of a sudden some other bigger path or door opens for us, and then it's like, oh yeah, that feeling wasn't just me being this privileged person who didn't want to go out of bed. It's like, no, that was real. I really didn't want to go to that job, because on the other side of that, or once I acknowledged that truth, there was this beautiful big other world out there that was real and true. And it's so cool because I know that I was listening to that voice inside of me. Then you popped into my life. Then there was like all these synchronicities. And I think that is so beautiful. And you capture it so well, that like we are all here for a purpose. And I love the idea of harmonizing. Like we can all have our own mission. It's like, I always think of an orchestra. Like there's all these instruments out there, and on their own, they might sound okay, but how gorgeous is it when it's all together in this orchestra and there's this beautiful thing, and you can notice when something's off. Like if there's an instrument, if there's a musician in there that's not quite on the right key, you can tell. And that's where that harmonization is so important. So sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but I just was bringing it back to the idea that this podcast and my career shift was, a lot of it was birthed, I feel, after that moment with you and listening to that and finding that reassurance. And so I have a huge shout out to you and gratitude to you, Kristen, for helping me to see the truth that I already knew and what that was. And I think, yeah, you're right too. I think we get so bogged down on like all the stuff that we think that we should be doing, when if we just listened to those little feelings in our brain, we might find something really beautiful and find that true life purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of people, I think are and were in very similar shoes to where you found yourself, that, oh, this is a great job. I feel like, why does this feel wrong? It's a good salary. I have, good coworkers. It's a respectable, and that feeling inside of you, is so wise. We have a lot of intuition that we've been trained to ignore, unfortunately. And so part of this process for me is to actually connect people, just sort of reaffirm their own intuition, connect people with their own intuitive guidance. That's what I do a lot through meditation classes. But that is my goal ultimately. I want to provide the foundational information for people, but I also want to teach them how to listen to themselves, because we generally know what we need. Or we know that something's not quite right, but hard to articulate what it is that we do need. So trying to put those words for people, the ideas, the tangible words and ideas, to give them a sense of a pathway forward.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. So when this sort of first happened, would you say that this was one of your, I mean, we always have, there's many aha moments when it comes to understanding your own life purpose, or sort of understanding that there was another, even a different path for you. How did that sort of feel what was that moment? Was it when you started to sort of hear this other voice, or hear that there was something else above you? Like what was that moment like for you?
Yeah, I knew pretty quickly that there was more to life than I had previously imagined for myself. Um, I had a successful career. Um, I have beautiful children and so many things that I'm proud of and that I think make up a good life. I wasn't necessarily looking for more meaning. But when I started to develop this ability to channel and really testing myself to see how deep I could go and what I could find out, I did realize my true purpose. And it all made sense. It all made sense. Even though, I have this great career, there's always been a little part that hasn't felt to be like I've nailed it. I have arrived. There's always this part of me that's searching for something else. So now that I recognize my own divine life purpose, which is actually to help other people understand their divine life purpose and get them on their path. That's what I'm here to do. That to me is, yes, that is 100%. That's the home run. That feels like I've landed the plane. It feels right. It feels 100% true. And that I could be joyful and happy doing that every day for the rest of my life, with or without pay.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you landed that plane, because turns out lots of people in our planet right now aren't doing that so well. So
It's hard. It's really hard.
Apparently it is very hard to land planes.
There are just so many societal expectations that we've created for ourselves that make it hard sometimes to choose another path. And so that's part of what I'm here to do, is to reassure people that getting on a different path, or getting on the path that is their own divine path, is very worthwhile, and they will feel a lot of joy and ease.
All right. So selfishly, I'm going to talk about what I discovered through you. And I I feel like you would probably explain it better, but I'll explain my sort of understanding of it was that when I came to you and this happened and I read through what you had heard for myself was that my divine life purpose was to understand. It was like the idea of freedom and energy, the freedom to have flowing energy through my life. So not necessarily just like freedom and like shouted in the streets. It was more just like the freedom to have a constant or consistent flow of energy throughout my life. Is that am I recalling that correctly?
Absolutely. Yeah. Your divine life purpose is freedom. It's the vibration of freedom. And when I say freedom, that is the closest English word that I could find to describe that vibration. But it really is freedom. And the freedom that you're describing is not political freedom. It's the freedom for energy to move freely. That's in our bodies, in our society, in our thoughts, in our spirit, energy moving freely without blockages. That's what you're here to do, to help almost restore or help to kind of ignite or reinstate or help to just develop and spread that vibration of true freedom.
Yeah. And that is so interesting because that is, I mean, I did understand a more political version of freedom in the years just before understanding this for myself. So it's very interesting that like this was already something like a topic that I was like, but if I, want to go do something and I'm still, let's say I'm a person that doesn't necessarily prioritize safety in that moment. Like, let's say I am more of a risk taker, which has been proven true. So to have that energy to move towards those sort of more risky behaviors, like what's to say that is there anything to stop me? So it was interesting that I was playing with that concept already. And then to understand that that was something that I wanted to not only show from the rooftops or from my podcast studio here, but it's so interesting that my version of freedom was also to understand that I wanted to break free of kind of that understanding of the 9 to 5, the traditional job, the, answering to a bell. I mean, my life had been run by a series of bells. There was the first bell in the morning of school, and then there was the lunch bell and the recess bell. And I was like, it was like this factory setting where I was like, oh, the bell, I got to go. And then, there was no free flowing time of like, oh, I do want some more lunch. I maybe do need 5 more minutes. It was like, oh, there's the bell. I got to go. And so it's really interesting. And now I do hope that, others can find this podcast and we're sort of uncovering what it means to also live a life of free flowing energy, listening to intuition, finding that true path. And that's exactly what Becoming Unbound was born from. And one thing that you had shared with me was that autonomy, freedom to me was autonomy over my own time. And it's so interesting because through this podcast, I've also discovered a lot of different versions of what freedom means. So freedom for me was creating my own schedule, creating a free flowing schedule, creating my own time, my schedule, and then even creating like the freedom to understand like I could make as much money as I wanted, let's say. And so there's all these different versions of freedom: financial freedom, freedom over your health, freedom over your medical choices, freedom from a relationship, freedom from a job. So Kristen, for you, you've kind of just described freedom, but for yourself, and maybe you can relate it back to finding a life purpose. What is freedom or becoming unbound? What does that mean for you and your sense of the word?
Yeah, there's so many different ways that I have and continue to discover freedom and identify all the ways that I'm still not free. So I myself am in a masterclass. I feel like every day when I enter these meditations, I'm learning more and I'm being taught information that I didn't know. And that information, it's almost like being in a very intensive course where you start to rethink the way you do things, where you act, what your fears are. But one of the, I would say, most pronounced ways that prior to a meditative practice, prior to channeling, that I felt bound, if we want to use that, how did I become unbound, is actually around my own health. And although I didn't have dire health, issues, I would say I was consistently battling or consistently dealing with one small health issue after another. I felt like it was almost weekly or a few times a month that I would be dealing with something new. And it all kind of culminated for me one day. I had a back seize, and I've had this many times in my life where my back just seizes up. And I'm not able to actually breathe well. I can't move. And in this particular instance, I ultimately had to call an ambulance and go to the hospital. And I could see my children watching me being taken out on a stretcher. And I knew that I needed to make a change, that this lifestyle, that I was trying so many things to be healthy, so many diets, so many exercise, so many different things. And I felt like I was running on a treadmill, constantly trying to get the new thing that would make me healthy finally. It's even a bit emotional for me to think about it now. And it was actually right after that incident that I made the decision to just take on a meditative practice, a daily, just try it. I said, I've never been able to meditate, couldn't do it. It's not for me, all the things. And I said, this is it. I have nothing else to try other than trying to bring some calm and peace into my body. And so in that case, what was happening to me in the context of freedom and energy movement was that there was a lot of energy blocks inside of me. Things were not flowing freely and manifesting in my body. And that happens to a lot of people. That's actually what is the source of illness and ill health for everyone. But it's really hard to identify that source. So in a meditative practice, the first thing was to learn to bring calm to yourself, then focus, and then for me, what happened naturally once I was able to achieve calm and focus was that I was able to get into a different altered state. Didn't happen overnight. I probably practiced for about 30 days straight before I felt like I was entering what some might call a different state, an altered state, a meditative state. That tingly feeling. You feel sort of a sense of love, a profound joy or bliss, and everything just becomes okay. And so in that state, I was able to enter into maybe even a deeper state of actually accessing information and wisdom that is there. It exists for us. And I actually think that we can all access it in different ways. So when I was able to access that information, I could understand what was happening inside of me, what was happening in my life. And I used that information and the guidance that I was receiving, because my higher self, if you want to put it that way, could see and recognize the energy blocks. So help walk me through how to remove slowly those blocks from my body. And that was always and still is the first step in my meditation, is to work on my own energy clearing and allowing the energy to move freely. And from that point, my health started to really improve. So I would say it's significantly better. I still have the odd thing pop up here and there because I'm still living a human life with human experiences, and I'm not a grandmaster that has it all figured out. I'm just an ordinary human. But I luckily have this great life coach, this spiritual coach, who every day is reminding me how to clear that energy and allow it to move freely. And so the health, let's call them small little annoyances that I find myself having now, they're small, they're short-lived, and I can actually sort of move them out of my existence quite quickly. So that, to me, when I think about freedom and what the freedom I've achieved is actually health and wellness. But freedom looks so different for so many people. But that is, for me, is the first step. It's the foundation of all other freedom.
Wow, that is profound. That's amazing. I actually heard, I think it was Peter Crone just talking about this, where he was sort of saying, like, you cannot be free. You cannot be healthy. You cannot be your best, most like fully charged, free, content self. You could do all of the hydrotherapy and you could do all the supplements and you could do all of the extra things, like the external things. You could do all of that. But until there is calm and harmony in your mind and in your body, and things are able to move and you are able to detox and get those detox pathways moving. Like all of those external things, you could sit under red light forever, but until your mind is at a place where you can hear your own thoughts, quiet those things, be free as much as possible. Life comes up. Life is stressful. Life is lifey. But until you're able to calm that thing, deal with those stresses, recognize anxiety and say, hey, this is a thing. Maybe if I deal with this now, I won't end up with a cold. And I resonate so much with what you just said, because I, like you, was the sick kid. Like it was never big. It was just always, I felt like there was always just something that my mom was like, oh my gosh, again? She's sick again? Like whether it's, and even to this day, like adult pink eye and a cough or a cold or just like these little things that would always come up. Like if anyone in school was sick, like I was the first one to either get it or whatever it was. And it was always, I think there's also a really big theme around people who are people pleasing and trying to be like this alternative version to yourself and making sure everyone else around you is okay. I think Gabor Mate talks about this and like the idea that people who are super nice oftentimes are the most diseased people because they're constantly putting out their niceness to the world and yet never really taking care of themselves. And by, sitting there and meditating, like that is the ultimate form of self-care where you take that time and you're like, this is for me because I cannot pour from an empty, sick, diseased cup. And that is so powerful, Kristen, that you recognize that and you took that time. And yeah, you could do it at the gym, you could garden, you could, do those activities, but really sinking into that meditation to be like, no, this is for my mind and my body. And I'm going to allow the energy to flow, listen, be quiet, like find out what those things are that are going on so that I can go about the rest of my day full and be kind. Not, I think someone also said, Alex Armosi says, kind, not nice, because nice doesn't really get you anywhere, but kindness, true kindness from the heart. And it's so funny that like you say like that dis-ease, that feeling in your body that was always there can be resolved when you pay attention to those energy centers, the mind, the heart, the all that stuff. So that's a really beautiful sentiment. And I'm glad you discovered that.
Yeah, I mean, you have said it so well, better than I ever could. And I think what I'm so happy about is that not only are so many people now talking about this, but medical science is now measuring this and evaluating this and proving this in scientific studies. Not that people who have benefited they don't need a medical study, but I think it just helps to normalize it for those who are thinking like, oh, that's hogwash, that's woo-woo, that's, it's actually not. It has been scientifically proven. Something that's so hard to measure can be measured in results. So I know, like, I can speak of my own results, but I think that I just think that there is so much. And for some people who may be at the, their health may be perfect, they may be at the height of their game, have no physical complaints, they can also still benefit from meditation because they may have blocks in other areas of their life. And so it's just a way to kind of get energy moving. That is so important because our body is made up of so much energy, and energy is meant to flow in our body all the time, both physically and energetically. So when that stops moving, that's when we get blocks. That's when we get sickness and disease or mental health or just barriers to life. So I love the way you phrased it, but it's just growing. The awareness about this is growing, and I couldn't be happier because I think it is foundational to change in our own personal lives and in our society.
Yeah, it sounds like, and the way I sort of think of it is like you watch all these movies with all these superheroes. And I think what science is actually proving right now is that is not fiction. And that is not just something that comes from these science fiction movies, that like our mind and our ability to, like, I don't know, there was something inside of me as a child that was like, Matilda is real. Like I I knew it and I'm not saying I'm making stuff move around my room, but that movie to me demonstrated, I was like, I think this is real. Like, and I tried, like, I tried as a child to be like, if she was a normal child who had these incredible mind powers, but they put it in a movie and it makes it so super like unrealistic. And then all of a sudden it feels like now science and some of the biggest authors and biggest influential people in our world are now discovering that this idea of a superhero, of being ultimate strength or mind powers or things like that, we are actually, maybe I sound absolutely nuts, but I think we're a little closer to that than what appears in this like far out science fiction superhero movies. Like, I think there's a realness to that. And I think it's being proven through amazing channels and through beautiful studies. And it's so great. And that is one thing I'm so hopeful about, is that we are discovering that we are very, very powerful people. And so many of, whether it's ancient texts or movies, they've been telling us this for a very long time. And there's been echoes of this through our society. It's just that we haven't listened the same way that we don't listen to our, intuition and things like that. And it just feels really great that is something that's coming around.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. And I think that in our society, in many ways, we've forgotten just how powerful we are. And that wisdom hasn't been completely lost. But I think in previous societies where it was a lot more normalized, people had the wisdom and the know-how to enter into these altered states and to really benefit from this wisdom or these almost what might be perceived as supernatural powers. And that is our birthright as humans. We have the ability to tap into these incredible gifts and wisdom. We just, as for the most part, have forgotten how.
Yeah, and there's all these little moments and those synchronicities, and I think it's really important to listen to those moments and to know that, like, yeah, I did think about that before that thing happened, and like that is real. And so it's not just deja vu, right? So it's a beautiful place to start understanding more. And I think we know nothing. Like, I think we know everything, and yet we know nothing about how much we know. So how confusing is that? But I think it is also one of the first biggest pieces of, and I know we talk about external freedom a lot, like leaving the job, leaving the relationship, leaving the country, if that's what you feel you need to do. But I think what you're tapping into for our listeners is also the idea of like going internal, and you can be shackled and bound up, bound by your energy and bound by these blockages and things that like energy just goes to a certain places and then stops. And like, that's the boundness that you are feeling and sensing into. And I love that you've sort of brought this conversation full circle to understanding that not only can there be external circumstances that are keeping you bound and shackled, but there are massive internal understandings that, or lack of understanding in your own body, that can be almost the best place to start. And that kind of leads me to my next question of maybe even the last question, is that if you could give yourself, your younger self, a younger person who's maybe starting to feel these little inklings of like, something doesn't feel right. Now, aside from coming to you and maybe even booking a session with you, because I highly recommend that, changed my entire life. But besides that, what would be that little piece of advice to be like, start here, start with this baby step. If you start to notice that in your body, something's not feeling right, first of all, stop and listen to that. And then second of all, this is my advice. What would it be?
Yeah, I mean, for most of our society, and I think social media has really played into this in a lot of ways, and it kind of just this feeling of wanting to please has really taken hold. We want to know that we're liked, and that feeling is very natural. It's very human to want to feel like you belong, you're part of a group. But I think what's happened is that natural feeling has almost spiraled a little bit out of control, where we put maybe too much emphasis on approval, getting liked, and having that external recognition in ways that is easily measurable. And I would say to my younger self, don't worry so much about pleasing others and making decisions that please others or please not even a specific person, but an ideal that we've developed in our society, an ideal around what it means to be successful, or what is a good marriage, or what is the right way to raise children, or all of the things that it's maybe not one person telling you, it's a message that you're hearing. And it seeps into our unconscious. It's there. And we're constantly measuring ourselves up against these things that we've created as a society, instead of listening to our own truth and listening to our own intuition and wisdom. So, as speaking to my younger self, and maybe other younger listeners out there, or older listeners out there that are still finding that they care quite a bit about what people think, is try and take baby steps to identify or listen to yourself, or ask yourself the question, am I doing this to please society? Am I doing this to please my parents? Am I doing this to please someone else? Or does this really feel right for me? That might be the small step to kind of take more time to think about that along your journey. I mean, I know that there are people who are so enmeshed in that world of pleasing that they may grow older, their parents may pass on, and they're actually still worried about what their parents would think of them. Their parents aren't even alive anymore, but it's so ingrained in our psyche and in our behaviors that we still would act in a way, even when those people that we worried that they're judging us, they actually are no longer even alive. And so that's how strong that feeling is. Now, of course, it's so natural to want to be part of a community, to fit in, to have these strong bonds, and to have sort of a way to connect in with others and have, like-minded groups. All that's so natural, and living a reciprocal or, symbiotic relationship with others. This is normal. It's not to say think about yourself all the time. It's actually to just try and develop truth to yourself. And that when you're doing something to please another, know that that's why you're doing it, and understand that that's why it's happened. Doesn't mean you don't do it, because there's a lot of joy that you can gain from actually bringing, compromising with others and doing things for others and giving to others. That can bring you a lot of joy. But if you're doing that exclusively and not understanding that's what you're doing, you fall into that trap of what you've described as being too nice. And you can be too nice in your gestures and in your decisions in life, where you're deciding everything based on what would be for the benefit of others and not yourself. You're not staying true to yourself. So it's really striking that balance between, how do I live in harmony with those around me? How do I find myself as part of a group? Because that's so important as humans. We want to be part of this group. We want to belong. We want to have closeness. We want to have relationships. But how do you also stay true to yourself? So that's a bigger question. It's probably a lifelong journey for all of us. But I think the first little baby step is asking yourself, am I doing this for myself? Is this true to myself? These bigger life decisions. Am I doing this to please someone else? Because most likely decisions that you make to please someone else, 10, 20 years down the road, you will be very unhappy and find yourself back at square one, and now wishing that maybe you had listened to yourself earlier. So that would be the advice for my younger self.
That's amazing. What a great thing is just like it. And we talk about this on the podcast a lot, is just like, is this like, people go through and they're checking all the boxes of society, and they got a great job and they got a house and they got a marriage and they got things, and they're like, I did all the things. And then at the end they're like, oh, but I was promised happiness and joy and this like running around in meadows feeling at the end of this, once I did all the checks on the checklist. And if you're anything like me, who I love checklists, so that feeling of getting it all done is amazing. But then you're left at the end. And I think that's a great visualization of like, is this thing that I'm about to do, accepting the job, going to the interview, like going on a date, is it because, or, doing any little small action, is it because I want to, or am I trying to, please someone or make sure that my image is, upheld, or that great thing of like, is this a virtue signaling thing? And I think that's a really simple, beautiful way of just like checking in with yourself to be like, do you want to do this? Or that's like, or is this something that, could be coming from expectation or a people pleasing tendency? What a great piece of advice. I feel like the end pieces of advice are always directly, like they're so right to my heart. So I hope other listeners have been able to resonate with this whole conversation, Kristen. And oh my gosh, you have changed my life in so many wonderful ways. Now, before we go, if you have a whole lot going on, so why don't you share, where can people find you? What are you up to these days? Let us know all the info.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of information on my website, which is newleafenergetics.ca. Including meditation classes, meditation recordings. As I mentioned, that's a huge passion of mine, is helping, in any small way that I can, helping people find that peace and stillness and focus to enter into their own meditative practice. So lots of information there online. And there's some upcoming women's retreats as well that I'm so excited about, because one of the themes, we didn't talk about this a lot, but one of the themes I hear a lot about in my channeling states is around the rebalance of the divine feminine. And so hosting these women's retreats is really an opportunity for me to empower women around the energy and the principles and the vibration of divine feminine, because it's a part of a much bigger sort of shift in our world. And so how to empower women to understand their divine life purpose and how they move and step into that, as well as, of course, practicing meditation. So really exciting 2 upcoming long weekend retreats in Ontario. One is the May long weekend. One is the August long weekend. More information on my website as well as the Awakened Women Collective website. So if you're interested in either, I encourage you to check it out. And then, of course, if anyone wants to book just a private appointment with me, then that you can do that on my website as well. And I'd be happy to connect in with anyone. Of course, I just absolutely love it.
Oh, I absolutely love that. So yes, I will put all of that information in the show notes. The retreat is being run by yourself, Kristen, and I don't know if she wants to be mentioned, but our wonderful mutual friend, Jen, she's just a wonderful woman, and I know that she is just so, like, part of her divine life purpose is such a beautiful one. And we'll have to have her on the podcast and have her talk about that. And so I'm so looking forward to those opportunities to connect with you in the retreats. And yes, amazing. So I will put all that info down below. Kristen, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so glad that we got to have this happen and hear your story. I feel like we need to have you back on, because there is so much more that I want to ask you about and find out more. So we'll have to book you on at another time.
Absolutely. Love to come back anytime.
All right, friends, that's a wrap on today's episode of Becoming Unbound. I hope this conversation with Kristen inspired you to explore new ways of stepping into your most aligned life and finding out more about your divine life purpose. I feel like you know way more than you think. If you loved this episode, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the podcast with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means the world and helps me and all of our guests reach more freedom-minded listeners like you. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.